Have a look at what Rachel Reeves says about what people think of her.
I've always felt I've got something to prove, and that's...
Have you proved it?
Well, I'm still doing that. I've always felt that people have underestimated me. They did when I was at school. They did when I played in those chess tournaments as a girl, particularly a girl that went to the local state school. I don't want everyone to be the same. I don't want everyone to be like me, and I'm sure most people wouldn't want to be anything like me. But everyone should have opportunities, and everybody should have that chance to do what they want and to fulfil their dreams and ambitions. And I'm going to keep going and keep fighting and prove to people that a woman from an ordinary background and a woman can do this job and can do it really, really well.
I mean, a bit like Keir Starmer when he amazingly was sort of so overwhelmed with the fact that she was a woman. I mean, how ridiculous is that? We've had several women prime ministers, by the way. The fact that we've got a woman chancellor for the first time shouldn't be surprising. But all I would say is that she's not very good at it. Liam, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good to be with you.
Good to see you. I mean, I don't know why she says people always underestimate me, because, I mean, there's a good reason why people underestimate her. She's actually done a lot worse than we thought she would do.
You know, it's almost demeaning to the office of Chancellor that obviously she was given a very difficult inheritance from the Tories. I always say that when I talk about these issues, because it's true. When the Tories left office in 2024, taxation was at a 70-year high, debt was approaching 100% of GDP, so she was dealt difficult cards. But now she's in this bind. Now she's made the situation a lot worse, with borrowing costs much higher than when she took over, not least because of the tens of billions of pounds that she's borrowed and her own government's inability to impose any kind of spending controls. To now go to sort of Channel 4 News for a soft focus, "Oh, I'm a girl, please be nice to me" interview is ridiculous. As you say, there's absolutely no issue about holding top jobs in this country if you're a woman. We almost, we celebrate it. We've had many female prime ministers, and women of legion across the top of society, as they absolutely should be. It's no longer a big deal, Rachel. If that's your only achievement, to be a woman, then you shouldn't be the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
No. Exactly. And I mean, the fact that she claims that, she was underestimated in chess tournaments, the closest we can find to her winning one is when she came 26th. Well, they were probably right to underestimate her then, weren't they?
Look, she's got a really, really hard job. It's a very, very difficult situation with the UK's national accounts at the moment. That's partly of her making, but it's partly not of her making. So, in general terms, I wish her well. I want her to do well. I want our public finances to be properly managed, Mike, because when they're not, then the economy risks collapse, as it currently does. She's close, I'm afraid, to driving the economy off a cliff, her and her party, because they keep upping taxes, and they keep upping taxes in a way which does maximum damage to growth while generating almost no revenue to plug the hole in the public finances. So, let's not harp on this point, but I do think it's pretty desperate PR tactics to say, everyone's being mean to me because I'm a woman and I went to state school. I mean, what are international capital markets going to think of that?
Right.
They want to know how you're going to manage the finances of the sixth biggest economy in the world. You've got a massive civil service there to help you. Get on with it. You don't need these soft, focused, stop bullying me interviews. It's as I say, it's demeaning to the office of Chancellor of the Exchequer.
But that's also the problem with this government. They seem to be obsessed with their image, They're constantly pushing people out. When this morning we got Bridget Phillipson doing the rounds, a less kind of, sympathetic character you couldn't find anywhere, trying to make out that she's, nice and soft and not as horrible as people make out. And it's like, well, why bother? Because people have already made up their minds about this government. They're not very happy with them. They're the most unpopular government ever. Keir Starmer's the most unpopular Prime Minister ever. They're doing things which are really, really damaging to the economy, and nobody's in favour of any of the stuff they're doing. So why are they on this kind of monumental PR drive?
It isn't serious government, is it? This is government by people who have only ever worked in politics and who've only ever worked in the public sector and have never actually had to worry about things like productivity, making payroll,
Right.
and all the rest of it. This isn't the politics of the real world, and it isn't authentic at all. It's when the spin completely eclipses the substance.
Yes.
Look, let's get back to the bare bones of the situation here. The UK is in fiscal danger, fiscal crisis. I've been saying this for well over a year. You've now got the posh papers like the FT and the Economist and so on admitting it. The BBC, of course, still haven't admitted it.
No.
Quite astonishing, the lack of urgency about their coverage of fiscal policy. I mean, really remiss, I would say, and I say that with deep regret because, again, I want the BBC to thrive and be the important institution that it should be, but it's completely missing the story when it comes to fiscal policy at the moment. She does face a lot of challenges, and she should get on with facing those challenges. Again, rather than, when she goes on these kind of desperate PR blitzes, all she does, like when she calls Britain a beacon of economic stability at the World Bank IMF meetings last week, it's obviously not true. Yeah. So you just undermine what remains of your own credibility. You undermine the ability of the state, the British state, to borrow money at reasonable prices, and you just make the public finances work. So please, 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 Chancellor, have some respect for the office, have some respect for yourself, and get on with the job. You don't need to do this soft focus, mood music stuff. This isn't the time for soft politics. This is the time for grown-up, very, very adult decision-making, because the world is watching and they're wondering if you're actually capable of managing the sixth biggest economy in the world.
Yes, and I mean, I think we both know the answer to that, and she can't do it, basically. She was in, as you say, Washington, D.C. last week with the IMF, telling us that the economy was growing. Because she got 0.1% in August. And you're kind of going, it's not really growing, is it? It's really not growing. And in fact, to say it's growing will give people the wrong impression, because people started saying to me, well, that's all right then. If the economy's growing, then she won't need to raise taxes. So, she can't have it both ways, can she?
Across the Western world, growth is very, very sluggish. Only the US is putting in anything approaching a normal growth performance at the moment. According to the IMF, on their estimates, will actually be the third fastest growing G7 economy this year. But having said that, when you look into the forecasts and you look at GDP, that is the size of the economy per head, we're actually at the bottom of the league table. And it's GDP, I think the point you make is fair, Mike, if you look at it in terms of GDP per head, because in terms of GDP per head, growth per person, the share of the cake that exists, we're actually at the bottom of the G7.
Yeah. Right.
And the problem is, Mike, we're also an outlier. And that was really what the IMF was saying, that the government cherry-picked the aspects of the funds report that was, partially positive for the UK. The actual really powerful part of the IMF's report into the UK economy is that, again, as some of us have been saying for many, many months, we're actually an outlier when it comes to inflation. Our inflation is much higher than the other G7 economies now across the piece. That's pushing up borrowing costs. That's making the fiscal situation even worse. And I'm afraid as she goes for more and more tax rises, particularly on business, like that NIC rise, that national insurance contribution rise, since she announced it last October, hiring's fallen pretty much every month. That fall in hiring accelerated after the NIC rise actually came in April. When you tax businesses, then those taxation costs generally feed straight into prices for consumers, and that drives inflation, and that makes your public finances more difficult to manage because you have to spend more to borrow money off the markets because they want compensation for that inflation, and so you make the whole situation worse. Look, this isn't rocket science, okay? This is pretty straightforward fiscal management. And I want to hear her talking about these concepts. I want to hear her reassuring global capital markets that she gets the stuff that I just said, that she is au fait with how you manage big economies, rather than, again, going to a very friendly TV show for a demeaning interview. Right.
Because the prices now of everything are getting ridiculous. I mean, I was talking to one of my guys today, when I go out for a roast lunch yesterday, 90 quid for two. you know, a couple of glasses of wine, something to eat, you know, no big deal, not pushing the boat out, 90 quid. You go, well, you know, that's ridiculous. It used to be 40, you know, or maybe 50. It's now 90.
Yeah, it was 40 or 50, you know, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And now it's 90. Look, we've talked about this before. Last week, you probably noticed in a lot of opinion polls, the cost of living took over inflation and borders as the thing that most people are most worried about in this country. Yeah. And that's going some, given the historic migration crisis that we've got, given the new focus on migration that the mainstream media is almost permitted to have.
Yes.
The Overton window on that issue has shifted completely, where now it is completely acceptable to say that you are really, really concerned about levels of immigration, not least because immigration has gone from being an issue about race and then about economics. It's gone, it's now seen in many ways as an issue about women's safety, certainly illegal immigration, which of course is much smaller than legal migration, but it's much more symbolic as a failure of the state that you've got so much illegal immigration, and it's illegal immigration where people are completely deliberately undocumented. They throw their passport away. That is feeding into big concerns about women's safety. And I'm afraid now this Home Office has been forced to release offending figures broken down by ethnicity, like lots of other countries do. That was an enormous struggle to get that to happen. Those fears about women's safety being linked to illegal migration do seem to be, there's a statistical foundation for those fears. It's not prejudice. It's actually, statistically
absolutely right.
warranted to have that. But even though that is the case with immigration, the cost of living is now more important. I would say, Mike, that we're talking about the Chinese spy scandal, and we're talking about immigration, and all those things are important. But over the next few weeks, and I would then say for months to come, the economy, the cost of living, is going to blow everything away across the news agenda. It's going to be the economy, left, right, and centre. And I say that not just because, I'm the guy that talks about the economy. I say that because you can see these numbers coming down the track. You can see much higher taxation coming down the track. You can see higher borrowing costs coming down the track. You can see, growth remaining sluggish. You can see the OBR's forecast upon which our political and media class puts such stock. Financial markets don't give a monkey's what the OBR says, because it's all made up, and they know it's all made up. How can you possibly forecast, to 10 billion quid, what the difference is going to be between hundreds of billions of spending and hundreds of billions of taxation in 5 years' time? It's complete fiction. It's complete displacement activity. The financial markets want to see that there are some rules, but they don't care, about the particular numbers. That's just a fixation, frankly, of journalists who know nothing about how public finances work. They want to see that she understands cash flow. They want to see that she's alarmed that when we borrow 15, 20 billion quid a month, as we have been in recent months, and 10 to 15 billion of that is going on to pay debt interest on previous borrowing. Right. So you're actually in a Ponzi scheme. We want to see her, the markets want to see her screaming at her own economically illiterate backbenchers, saying this cannot go on.
No. I've got a quick question for you on that, actually. This comes from Simon in Paddock Wood. He said, please ask Liam this. Why do we still pay debt interest on the Mickey Mouse quantitative easing money that we printed? Surely this is paying interest to ourselves, but we do not see it. I understand Switzerland don't pay interest on their QE money.
Well, this is a very, very complicated question, but the sort of instincts behind the question are completely right. To me, it doesn't make sense to be paying that interest. It certainly doesn't make that sense to be paying that interest now. It is just a kind of accounting phenomenon. The Bank of England is insisting that it should be paid. I think that insistence should be pushed back against. The Bank of England also, slightly separately but related issue, insists on selling bonds back into the market, so-called quantitative tightening, the reverse of quantitative easing. Do keep up at the back. They insist on doing that now as well, when other comparable central banks aren't doing so-called, active quantitative tightening. It's actually it's ridiculous to be doing that now when our public finances are under such scrutiny, when the French government is under such scrutiny, its credit ratings being downgraded the way they are. A few politicians and analysts are telling the Bank of England they need to rein their neck in. Richard Tice is one, of course. You've got John Redwood from the Tories, who's been saying this for a long time, a man who really knows his way around the Bank of England's balance sheet and the public finances. You've even got some former Bank of England officials who are saying that this is a problem. What I don't think you can do is say, if the Bank of England stops paying interest, that means we've got an extra 40 billion quid. Let's spend that 40 billion quid. I don't think you should do that.
No.
You should take it as a windfall to take pressure off the public finances, not use these accounting balance sheet.
Well, yeah, it's like somebody
to say we've got extra money, so we're going to give this extra money to our economically illiterate Labour backbenchers to shut them up.
Right. It's like saying, look, I've got a new credit card. It's got £25,000 limit on it. I'll just go and spend 25,000 quid on it, immediately, without even thinking about how you're going to pay it back. It's mad. One final thing before I let you go. Apparently, you predicted this. This is a montage that's been put together about Rachel Reeves coming back for more tax. Have a look.
This is a once-in-a-parliament budget.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
But we don't need to come back for more. We're not going to have to come back and ever do a budget like this again. So never again will I have to do a budget like I did in October. There is no need to come back with another budget like this. We never need to do that again.
5 minutes later.
There are tax rises coming down the track.
Yeah, but
you did predict that, apparently, and here we go again, right?
I'm afraid so, but it doesn't have to be this way. That there is a gap in the public finances if you absolutely insist on not touching the spending side of the balance sheet. If you cower in front of your own backbenchers when you're asking them to recognise we need to rein in the increase in welfare spending. Let's just think back briefly, Mike, to the summer. Liz Kendall, who I think is a reasonable person, who was the welfare secretary. She was trying to say, look, health and sickness and disability benefits are set to rise from roughly, 70 to almost 100 billion in this parliament, right? In one parliament. And she was saying, look, maybe they can go up from about 70 to about 95. It's still a massive increase. And her backbenchers went completely insane. And in order to prove who's in charge, they actually insisted that Liz Kendall and the Labour leadership's attempts at welfare reform, rather than saving any money at all, would actually cost even more money. They upped the ante. So if that's the way you're managing your party, if you haven't got the guts to be grown up enough to face down vested interests in your party who think that the only reason a Labour government should exist is to always and everywhere spend more government money, then you are going to have to raise taxes in order to meet that extra spending. But the thing is, Mike, we're now at the point where raising tax rates is leading to less tax revenue, because she's done things like she's raised capital gains tax rate. There's less capital gains tax revenue coming. Look at, this is a Tory thing as well. Look at, duty on cigarettes. Everyone knows in every pub and club of the country, most people now are smoking black market fags, right? Of course they are, because it's 20 quid for a box of fags. So most people are smoking cigarettes on which the government isn't getting any duty. They're coming in suitcases from different parts of the world and being sold in pubs. So there's less tobacco duty around. This is the Laffer curve. When tax rates get so high, you get less tax revenue. When you raise national insurance contributions for employers, don't be surprised when they employ fewer people. When you put VAT on school fees, don't be surprised when loads of independent schools close down. So again, you get less tax from them because they don't exist anymore. And this is where we are. She's surrounded by, frankly, policy wonks and coneheads that have got no understanding of business, no understanding of the real world. They think if they put something in their Excel spreadsheet, that makes it true. Just like she thinks if she gives a nice soft focus interview, that solves all her problems. They have to understand, and Whitehall in general isn't good at understanding this, that taxation and the modelling of taxation and the forecasting of tax revenues It's a dynamic thing. Tax rates change behaviour, which then change outcomes. You can't just change the tax rate and it spits out the revenue number. It doesn't work like that. It's much, much more subtle and multifaceted than that. And I'm afraid, Mike, in the Chancellor's thinking, yeah, she's obviously not stupid by any means. She's obviously got a decent intelligence about her, and yet she doesn't seem to demonstrate that.
No, I mean, that's the trouble. She doesn't come across as somebody who's terribly bright. That's the problem.